Do you also no longer know what to believe about all the information about the climate? In this video, I list climate facts. First, the definition of climate. Climate is the long-term weather pattern in a region, typically averaged over 30 years. The climate has always been changing throughout Earth's history. There have been warm periods and cold periods, as you can see in this graph. The Central England temperature record contains the longest continuously measured thermometer-based regional temperature data set in the world, going back more than 350 years. This record began in 1659, in the depths of the Little Ice Age, 1250–1800, which was marked by some of the coldest temperatures in nearly 8,000 years. The period of the late 17th century and early 18th century was a horrifically cold period known as the Maunder Minimum. Thankfully, the current warming trend we are in began in the year 1695. The next 40 years had more than twice the rate of warming as we experienced in the 20th century. The first half of this 300-plus year warming had about the same amount of temperature rise as the latter half and was entirely naturally driven. I will explain the natural cause of temperature change on Earth later. Melting glaciers and rising sea levels are the direct result of warming. The evidence shows that the global warming causing the rise in sea levels and the retreat of the glaciers began long before any significant man-made CO2 increases could have influenced either. Both are directly the result of the natural warming that began in the late 17th century. What was the CO2 concentration during the Earth's history? For the last 140 million years, CO2 levels fell steadily. Both the relatively short-term data from ice cores and much longer-term data going back 140 million years show an alarming downward trend towards CO2 starvation. The release of carbon dioxide by the use of fossil fuels has allowed humanity to increase concentrations of this molecule. What is CO2? Carbon dioxide is a component of the air that plants use for photosynthesis. In photosynthesis, a plant makes sugars from CO2 and water to live on. CO2 is not poisonous, as is sometimes said. CO2 is plant food. Contrary to the oft-repeated mantra that today's CO2 concentration is unprecedentedly high, our current levels of carbon dioxide are at near historic lows. The average CO2 concentration in the preceding 600 million years was more than 2,600 parts per million, nearly 7 times our current amount and 2.5 times the worst case predicted by the IPCC for 2100. We don't have too much CO2, we don't have enough. We came close to line of death, 150 parts per million CO2 below, which plants can't survive. The release of carbon dioxide by the use of fossil fuels has allowed humanity to increase concentrations of this beneficial molecule and perhaps avert an actual CO2-related climate apocalypse. Global man-made CO2 emissions began accelerating in the post-World War II economic boom and continue increasing today. If CO2 is the primary factor driving a warming planet, we should see indications of an acceleration of warming beginning in that period and continuing today. But the IPCC climate models overestimate the effect of CO2 on temperature many times over. If we look at the Earth's temperature and CO2 concentration in history, there is absolutely no connection between the two. Instead of the narrative that we are in the hottest period of history, we are in the coldest period of history. So, contrary to popular belief, the Earth is not burning up at all. Polar bears are not extinct, but their population is growing. The ice caps have not melted. The ice is growing. Sea levels are not rising significantly. So there is no climate crisis at all. Instead of a crisis, there is good news about the state of the Earth. The Earth is rapidly greening due to the current concentration of CO2. Vegetation on Earth has been expanding for decades, satellite data show. The Sahara Desert had shrunk by 8% over the previous 3 decades. This 8% means more than 700,000 square kilometers more area that's become green, an area almost as big as Germany and France combined. There is also an increase in food production in agriculture worldwide. World grain production and amount harvested per acre show that crop and food production has steadily increased, with only positive effects from our changing climate. Why do you only hear alarming messages about the climate? This fits into a trend that has been going on since 1970. In the 60s and 70s, environmental awareness developed. Since then, activists have improved a lot with action. Just look at the end of whaling. But since then, we have also been bombarded with doomsday predictions. All predictions that have not come true in retrospect. You wonder why? Because there is a plan behind all this doom and gloom. Now I am venturing into conspiracy theory. But how many so-called conspiracy theories have turned out to be true in recent years? Think of the COVID years. But to be clear, the climate facts I have presented here can be scientifically proven. The following is just a theory that I cannot prove. This plan was developed in the second half of the 20th century by a crazy economist and quickly had the support of the rich of the world. These multi-billionaires had lost faith in their lives. They only lived to earn more money, and that life seemed meaningless. They also did not like their bad image as egoistic, narcissistic rich people, and they wanted to polish their image with charity and social action. They found each other in the fight for a livable earth, and especially saving the earth. The World Economic Forum was born. In the beginning, all members maintained that they were only a talking club, but in the meantime they carried out their agenda. They incorporated leaders of large companies, heads of state, and leaders of NGOs into their club and taught these young global leaders how to carry out their plan. With their money and influence, they also bought global associations such as the UN, WHO, the IMF. These clubs also started to carry out their agenda, and their propaganda worked with many people, especially people from left-wing political parties. They embraced the climate agenda and started making money with it. Their agenda is to scare the population with multiple crises, destabilize society with mass immigration, replace community spirit and national pride with a global consciousness, destabilize the family and the man-woman relationship with woke nonsense, all to create a totalitarian society with them as stakeholders in power. That they themselves do not believe in their climate propaganda, we see in their hypocritical behavior. Those who shout the loudest about climate action often own multiple country houses, cooled with air conditioning, also at sea, so they do not believe in sea level rise, private planes, yachts with multiple diesel engines, fly around the world. We have to be able to travel for work and climate conferences and drive diesel and gasoline cars. Then that 1.5 degrees of the Paris Climate Agreement in 1995. How did that come about? There has to be a scientific basis for an expensive energy transition. For decades, we have been told that we must not let global warming exceed 2 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial global average temperature. Recently, the IPCC lowered this limit to 1.5 degrees Celsius. There is little scientific basis for the 2 degrees Celsius limit, but it was a simple focal point and it sounded bold and perhaps feasible. Then the IPCC admit the goal is effectively unachievable. So there is no scientific proof that if the 2-degree limit were exceeded, life on our planet as we know it today would no longer be possible. This limit is just a political compromise that they thought could be achieved. First, back to science. They always claim that the science about climate is settled. 97% of scientists agree with their position that human CO2 emissions are responsible for catastrophic global warming. This claim has been going around since an article by Cook et al. In 2013. These researchers, otherwise climate alarmists, write in their article that 97% of scientific articles about climate conclude that humans are the cause of climate change. If we look more closely at the data from the article, you come to a percentage of 2.5%. They looked at 11,944 abstracts. Of these, 64% had no claim about whether humans were responsible or not. The researchers therefore simply ignored these 64%. That left about 4,000 abstracts. In 64 it was claimed that humans are most likely responsible, and in 41 that humans are responsible. That is 2.5% of the total number of abstracts with a view, not 97%. But if we calculate over all abstracts, the percentage is less. Conclusion: there is no scientific consensus about climate change caused by humans. What is clear is that there is only money for scientific research that supports climate change caused by humans. Scientists who came to different conclusions were fired. So nowadays, the only independent research is done by retired scientists who are no longer afraid for their careers, but articles that go against the narrative are also rejected for publication. So, almost all countries in the world have committed to an energy transition away from fossil fuels to sustainable energy. The population of all those countries has not been asked for their consent, nor has the cost, the impact on the economy and society been considered. Sustainable energy was defined as biomass, solar and wind energy. The population was told that energy would become cheaper with the transition because solar and wind energy are free. Now in practice, achieving the energy transition is projected to cost about $5.8 trillion annually from 2023 to 2030 for the 48 developing economies studied, equal 19% of their GDP. Per person, the annual cost comes to $1,271 to achieve goals. All these costs must be paid by the citizens of those countries. And has energy become cheaper? No. The price of energy in the Western world has become 2 to 3 times more expensive. For all these costs, the citizens get back wobbly energy. Energy from coal, nuclear energy, and gas is constant, but the wind does not always blow and the sun does not always shine. In addition, this energy cannot be stored well. The electricity grid also needs to be expanded in a transition to all electric. But alpha-hell politicians do not understand this. So in practice, in order to guarantee security of supply, there must always be a fossil energy plant backup. A modern society cannot survive with only sustainable energy. To make this unreliable energy possible, the landscape is being filled with windmills and solar panel fields. Apart from the landscape pollution, these windmills leak greenhouse gases, toxic substances, and they also need liters of diesel and lubricating oil for maintenance. The wind farms in the North Sea consume 40 million litres of diesel and 1,500 litres of hydraulic oil from the start-up to 2024. In addition, windmills are made with fossil energy and are hardly recyclable. Forests' natural CO2 storage are cut down for their placement, sometimes in nature reserves. Tens of thousands of birds and endangered bats fall victim to these windmills every year. At windmills at sea, also often built in protected nature reserves, marine life is threatened. It has been shown that porpoises and whales die due to the disturbance at sea. Yet you do not hear any environmental clubs protesting against this destruction of nature and this slaughter of birds and marine life. Solar panels and batteries for electric cars require rare metals. The extraction of these metals involves enormous destruction of nature and many litres of diesel for the heavy mining equipment. Child labour for cobalt mining in Africa? Nobody cares. I haven't even mentioned the cutting down of primeval forests in Europe to fuel biomass power stations. In conclusion, renewable energy is more expensive and unreliable. Renewable energy is accompanied by enormous destruction of nature and the environment. They are destroying the planet to save the planet. I promise to come back to the cause of the current warming. In fact, the current warming is of course because the Earth is coming out of an ice age. But what causes the temperature on Earth? That is due to many different facts. Changes to Earth's climate over long periods are caused by the natural variations in intensity and distribution of solar radiation that reaches the planet. Solar activity can be seen by the appearance of sunspots. Then there are the Milankovitch cycles. These cycles are because Earth's orbit around the Sun is eccentric, its axis is tilted, and it wobbles, each over different time frames or cycles. But these cycles take place over tens of thousands of years. Then there are volcanoes that are a natural climate forcing. Over the last few hundred years, erupting volcanoes have caused global temperatures to drop for short periods. This is because they erupted sulfur dioxide, which reflects sunlight, cooling the atmosphere for up to 7 years. Volcanoes also release carbon dioxide CO2 into the atmosphere. Volcanoes have also been implicated in short-lived climate change events, including the so-called Little Ice Age in Europe. Water vapor is the strongest greenhouse gas, accounting for 60% of warming. But this effect is not influenced by humans. As temperatures increase, the atmosphere contains more water vapor. Clouds form when water molecules condense onto a surface that's warmer than the air. Dust, soot, salt crystals, etc. The type of cloud, how reflective they are, how high they are, whether it's day or night, and the percentage of ice crystals versus water molecules in them all help determine whether they contribute to warming or cooling. Other greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide and nitrogen. Man-made anthropogenic greenhouse gases after carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide and methane. The researchers found that doubling atmospheric methane from either natural or human causes would increase greenhouse gas absorption by only about 0.3%, a negligible amount. Methane will have no measurable effect on global temperatures. Also, doubling the carbon dioxide concentration has a negligible effect on temperature. I cannot give a definitive explanation. Further research needs to be done into the effects of all these climate regulators on the Earth's temperature and what has the greatest effect in this time period. But unfortunately, even now, all the money goes to climate alarm research into human-caused warming. I hope that with this video, I have made the climate facts a bit clearer and how to interpret them.